A military-grade censorship operation has been under effect for quite some time, and we learn about that in a congressional hearing with Michael Shellenberger, Matt Taibbi, and others in Congress, and they reveal some details for us about this organization called CTIL, C-T-I-L, the Cyber Threats Intelligence League. Very powerful and scary, but it's a pretty serious organization because they're censoring a lot of free, protected speech in our country and elsewhere. And so we're going to go through the actual report that Shellenberger dropped on the X platform. But first, we're going to hear from him. He gave a nice opening statement, issuing a very serious warning for all of us to heed. And Matt Taibbi follows up with an opening statement, and we're going to hit some highlights from this testimony from Dan Goldman from the left, who I think is now officially a Hunter Biden conspiracy theorist, and Jim Jordan, who brings in the part about censorship. And so this is what Michael Shellenberger said as the hearing in front of the Weaponization Committee got underway today.
9 months ago, I testified and provided evidence to the subcommittee about the existence of a censorship industrial complex, a network of government agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security, government contractors, and big tech media platforms that conspired to censor ordinary Americans and elected officials alike for holding disfavored views. I regret to inform the subcommittee today that the scope, power, and law-breaking of the censorship industrial complex are even worse than we had realized back in March. 2 days ago, my colleagues and I published the first batch of internal files from the Cyber Threat Intelligence League, which show U.S. and U.K. military contractors working in 2019 and 2020 to both censor and turn sophisticated psychological operations and disinformation tactics developed abroad against the American people. Many insist that all that we identified in the Twitter files, the Facebook files, and the CTI files were legal activities by social media platforms to take down content that violated the terms of service. Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and other big tech companies are privately owned, people point out, and free to censor content. And government officials are free to point out wrong information, they argue. But the First Amendment prohibits the government from abridging freedom of speech. The Supreme Court has ruled that the government may not induce, encourage, or promote private persons to accomplish what is constitutionally forbidden to accomplish. And there's now a large body of evidence proving that the government did precisely that. What's more, the whistleblower who delivered the CTIL files to us says that its leader, a quote-unquote former British intelligence analyst, was quote-unquote in the room at the Obama White House in 2017 when she received the instructions to create a counter-disinformation project to, quote, stop a repeat of 2016.
Whoa!
The U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Information Security Agency, CISA, has been the center of gravity for much of the censorship, with the National Science Foundation financing the development of censorship and disinformation tools, and other federal government agencies playing a supportive role. Emails from CISA's NGO and social media partners show that CISA created the Election Integrity Partnership, EIP, in 2020, which involved the Stanford Internet Observatory and other U.S. government contractors. EIP and its successor, the Virality Project, urged Twitter, Facebook, and other platforms to censor social media posts by ordinary citizens and elected officials alike. EIP reported that they had a 75% response rate from the platforms and that 35% of the URLs that they reported were either removed, labeled, or throttled or soft blocked. In 2020, the Department of Homeland Security, CISA, violated the First Amendment and interfered in the election, while in 2021, CISA and the White House violated the First Amendment and undermined America's response to the COVID pandemic by demanding that Facebook and Twitter censor content that Facebook itself said was, quote-unquote, often true, including about vaccine side effects. All of this is profoundly un-American. One's commitment to free speech means nothing if it does not extend to your political enemies. In his essential new book, Liar in a Crowded Theater, Jeff Kosef, a law professor at the United States Naval Academy, shows that the widespread view that the government can censor false speech and or speech that, quote-unquote, causes harm is mostly wrong. The Supreme Court has allowed very few constraints on speech. For example, the test of incitement to violence remains its immediacy. I encourage Congress to defund and dismantle the government organizations involved in censorship. That includes phasing out all funding for the National Science Foundation's Track F, Trust and Authenticity in Communication Systems, and its Secure and Trustworthy Cyberspace track. I would also encourage Congress to abolish CISA in DHS. Short of taking those steps, I would encourage significant guardrails and oversight to prevent such censorship from happening again. In particular, it's very easy to see the line in CISA. They say they're covering physical security, cybersecurity, but they added a third one, cognitive security, which is basically attempting to control the information environment and how people think about the world, including the stories that they tell.
Control us.
Finally, I would encourage Congress to consider making Section 230 liability protections contingent upon social media platforms known in the law as interactive computer services to allow adult users to moderate our own legal content through filters that we choose and whose algorithms are transparent to all of us. I would encourage Congress to prohibit government officials from asking the platforms to remove content, which the Supreme Court may or may not rule unconstitutional next year when it decides on the Missouri v. Biden case. Should the court somehow decide that the government requests for censorship are constitutional, then I would urge Congress to require such requests to be reported publicly instantaneously so that such censorship demands occur in plain sight. Thank you very much for hearing my testimony.
All right, very shocking and scary revelations there. We are up against some very powerful actors, global efforts with millions, if not billions of dollars and decades of infrastructure behind them so that 2016 doesn't happen again. And we all felt it, by the way. I remember what 2016 felt like on the internet. I remember what 2020 felt like on the internet, and they were censoring and suppressing us hard in 2020 and in the year before that. So it was a night and day operation. I mean, the thing worked, right? They suppressed a bunch of people. And so the amount of energy that we're going to have to bring this next election, the amount of enthusiasm, we're going to have to drag 5 people to the polls with us. Wake up! We're going voting today. We have to become stronger to buttress this effort. So let's take a look at the actual files that he's talking about, because it is pretty disgusting. This is the report from Michael Shellenberger. Highly recommended follow at Shellenberger on the X platform. And he tells us, now, many people insist that the government isn't involved in censorship, but they are. And now a whistleblower has come forward. Here's the post. CTIL, files version 1, tells us the US and the UK military contractors created a sweeping plan for global censorship in 2018. A whistleblower made this known. Says a whistleblower has come forward with an explosive new trove of documents, rivaling or exceeding the Twitter files, the Facebook files, the cyber threat intelligence leak, not a Marvel film, but certainly filled with evil actors, says that officially began as the volunteer project of data scientists. Just scientists. The worst. And defense and intelligence veterans, but whose tactics over time appear to have been absorbed into multiple official projects, including Homeland Security. Now, the CTI leaked documents offer the missing link, answers to the key questions that were not addressed in the Twitter files and the Facebook files. Combined, they offer a comprehensive picture of the birth of the anti-disinformation sector and the censorship apparatus. Now, the whistleblower's documents describe everything from the genesis of the digital censorship programs to how they partnered with sock puppet accounts to offer offensive techniques. So they were silencing people and creating fake sock puppet accounts. One document says, quote, lock your stuff down. Explains one document about creating your spy disguise, lock your stuff down. Another document says that while such activities overseas are, quote, typically done by the CIA and the NSA and the DoD, censorship efforts, quote, against Americans have to be done using private partners because the government doesn't have legal authority. See how that works? CIA can go do it on their own. The government can just do it overseas, but they got to use a third-party provider to do it. So the whistleblower says that the leader of the CTI League, a former, quote, British intelligence analyst, was, quote, in the room when Obama was there to stop a repeat of 2016. So over the last year, congressional investigators and others, they have uncovered a network of over 100 government agencies and non-governmental organizations who work together to do this. DHS, CISA, all created an organization in 2020. They called it the Election Integrity Partnership, which involved Stanford Internet Observatory and U.S. government contractors. The Virality Project and others, they urged Twitter and Facebook and others to censor social media posts. Now, despite overwhelming evidence of government-sponsored censorship, it had yet to be determined where the idea for this mass censorship regime came from. But now we know. In 2018, an SIO official and former CIA fellow called Rene De Resista generated national headlines before and after testifying to the U.S. Senate about government interference in 2016. But what happened between 2018 and spring 2020? Well, the year 2019 has been a black hole in the research of the censorship industrial complex. When one of us, Michael, testified to the U.S. House of Representatives about the censorship industrial complex of March of this year, the entire year was missing from his timeline. But now, a large trove of documents, including strategy documents, training videos, presentations, and internal messages reveal that in 2019, U.S. and UK military and intelligence contractors, led by a former UK defense researcher called Sarah Jane S.J. Terp, developed a sweeping censorship framework. And these contractors co-led CTIL, which partnered with CISA in the spring of 2020. Now, in truth, they say, the building of the censorship industrial complex began even earlier in 2018. Internal Slack messages show that woman Terp and her colleagues and officials from DHS and Facebook all work closely together in the process. The CTIL framework and the public-private model are the seeds of what both the US and the UK would put into place back in 2020 and 2021. They would mask their censorship and their cybersecurity institutions and their counter-information agendas with a heavy focus on stopping disfavored narratives, not just wrong facts, and pressuring social media platforms to take down information or take other actions to prevent content from going viral. Now, in the spring of 2020, CTIL began tracking and reporting disfavored content on social media, such as anti-lockdown narratives, quote, like all jobs are essential, which this show was birthed in the spring of 2020. And that's why we started it, because they were wrecking the country. We couldn't stand for it. All jobs are essential. We won't stay home. Open America now. CTIL created a law enforcement channel for reporting content as part of these efforts. The organization also did research on individuals posting anti-lockdown hashtags like FreeCA, FreeAZ, and kept a spreadsheet with details from their Twitter bios, like little whiny censors. The group also discussed requesting takedowns and reporting website domains to registrars. CTIL's approach to disinfo went far beyond censorship. They engaged in offensive operations to influence public opinion. They discussed ways to promote counter-messaging, on how to co-opt hashtags, on how to dilute disfavored messaging, create sock puppet accounts, and infiltrate private-only individual groups. In one suggested list of survey questions, CTIL proposed asking members and potential members, have you worked with influence operations before? Have you done active measures? Have you done PSYOPs before? Now, the documents came from a highly credible whistleblower, but we were able to independently verify their legitimacy through extensive cross-checking of information to publicly available sources. The whistleblower said that they were recruited to participate in CTIL through the monthly cybersecurity meetings hosted by DHS. Now, the FBI declined to comment, obviously. CISA did not respond to our request for comment, and TERP and other key CTIL leaders also did not respond to comment. But one person involved, this person called Bonnie Smalley, replied over LinkedIn saying, all I can comment on is that I joined the CTI League, which is unaffiliated with any government organizations, because I wanted to combat the inject bleach nonsense, which was a fake hoax during COVID. I can assure you that we had nothing to do with the government, though. Yeah, right. Now, yet the document suggests that the government employees were engaged members of CTIL. Government employees were engaged members of CTIL. Now, it wasn't officially a government organization, but of course we know that they were involved. Now, one individual who worked for DHS, Justin Frappier, was extremely active in CTIL, participating in regular meetings and leading trainings. You see this email here, or this is from the Slack channel, COVID-19 CTI League. They're like Avengers. They're like disinformation Avengers. We're a league, yeah. Here, they shared this one, disinformation triage. Oh my gosh, these people are just something else. So disinformation triage. SJ Terp says here, reading group and just over a big book says that we're on books Thomas read active measures chapters. Oh, that's good. They're reading active measures chapters, I guess, or she's sharing a post. I told my doctor, so much work to do. I know a lot of medical field people. Was added this person, Justin Frappier, disinformation team, incident management team. He's added to the group. Justin Frappier drops this message. He says, LOL, hello from the other side. He's a government official. Sounds like, yeah, there he is. There he is, government official. He works for DHS, who worked for them, was very active there. Now, their ultimate goal, said the whistleblower, was, quote, to become a part of the federal government. In our weekly meetings, they made it clear that they were building these organizations within the federal government, and if you build the first iteration, we could secure a job for you. Now, TERP's plan, which she shared in presentations to information security and cybersecurity groups in 2019, was to create misinfosec communities. That would include the government. Now, both public records and whistleblower documents suggest that she achieved this. In April 2020, Chris Krebs, then director of CISA, announced on Twitter that CISA was partnering with CTIL. It's really an information exchange. No, you're outsourcing your censorship. Now, the documents also show that TERP and her colleagues, through a group of misinfosec working group, which included the RESTA, created a censorship, influence, and anti-disinformation strategy called Adversarial Misinformation and Influence Tactics and Techniques, AMIT. They wrote AMIT by adapting a cybersecurity framework developed by Mitra, a major defense and intelligence contractor that has an annual budget of $1 to $2 billion. TERP then used the military framework to develop the disarm framework, which the WHO then employed in countering anti-jab info across Europe. Now, a key component of her work through CTIL, misinfosec, AMIT was to insert the concept of cognitive security into the fields of cybersecurity and information security. In sum, they tell us that the total of these documents is a clear picture of a highly coordinated and sophisticated effort by the US and the UK governments to build a domestic censorship effort and to influence operations similar to the ones that they have used in foreign countries. At one point, TERP openly referenced, quote, her work in the background on social media issues related to the Arab Spring spring. Another time, the whistleblower said that she expressed her own apparent surprise that she would ever use such tactics against American citizens. I can't believe we're doing this. But Trump, according to the whistleblower, roughly 12 to 20 active people involved in CTIL worked at the FBI or CISA. For a while, they had their agency seals next to your name, okay? FBI, CISA, whatever. They just put the info, the name, seal next to your name. TERP had a CISA badge that went away at some point. They took those off, like, oops, maybe we shouldn't do that. Now, the ambitions of the 2020 pioneers went far beyond simply urging Twitter to warn stuff. The framework calls for the discrediting of individuals, necessary prerequisite for demanding censorship against them. You don't just ban their posts, you have to wreck them. It calls for training influencers to spread messages. It calls for trying to get banks to cut off financial services to individuals who organize rallies and events. The timeline of CISA's work with CTIL, leading up to its work with the EIP and the VP, strongly suggests that the model for public-private censorship may have originated with a framework originally created for military contractors coming out against us. Now, what's more, the techniques and the materials outlined by CTIL closely resemble materials later created by CISA's Countering Foreign Intelligence Task Force and the Mis, Dis, and Malinformation team. Now, over the next several days and weeks, they say, we intend to present these documents to Congress. We're going to make them all publicly available and show you what's happening. But for now, we need to take a closer look at what happened in 2018, 2019, and beyond. Here are some of the forms that they were able to gather up. So here's the information environment. You have the physical dimension, right? This is anti-misinformation, military type frameworks that they are deploying to censor us on a grand scale across the whole country. The information environment. Well, we've got the physical dimension, obviously, where the information environment overlaps with the physical world. We talk about this often on our member streams, the world of atoms versus the world of bits, a Peter Thiel concept, information systems and networks. Key characteristics, we've got computers, communication systems, supporting infrastructure, and so on. Then we've got the information dimension. So we've got the physical apparatus, then the information layer. Information is collected, disseminated. It's got dual nature. Information is itself and it's the medium. Information content and the flow where automated decision-making takes place. And then the most nefarious, the cognitive dimension that needs to be secured, where human decision-making takes place in your brain. Dimensions of the intangibles. What do they need to impact? Morale, unit cohesion, public opinion, situational awareness. Key characteristics, perceptions, emotions, awareness, and understanding. They need to get involved in that. So they published all sorts of stories saying that they were just volunteer cybersecurity experts and former Israeli intelligence and Microsoft security manager. Now, these articles claim that these highly skilled professionals just decided to help billion-dollar hospitals all on their own time. But apparently, they'd grown to 1,400 members in 76 countries. They helped to lawfully take down 2,800, quote, cyber criminal assets. At every opportunity, they were removing stories. Now, Terp and Pablo, other leaders, they had backgrounds as former military contractors, and according to her bio, she also designed machine learning algorithms on aerial systems for the UK Ministry of Defense. So these people are smart people. Brewer is a former US Navy commander. According to his bio, he also was a senior military advisor, innovation officer at SoftWorks, Naval Central Command. He's got the creation of CTIL on his LinkedIn page. In 2018, Terp attended a 10-day military exercise organized by US Special Operations Command, where she first met Brewer and others. Now, they admitted on a podcast that her aim was to bring military tactics to use on social media platforms. Brewer said, I wear two hats, the military director of the Donovan Group and SoftWorks, which is completely unclassified nonprofit. Here's the countermeasures framework, which is just incredible. Okay, so this is what they do every time there's misinformation. Planning, have a disinformation response plan, improve stakeholder communication, make civil society more vibrant, red team disinformation, design mitigations as soon as something hits, platform regulation, etc. at the bottom on all of these columns. Objective planning, tabletop simulations, media literacy through games, educate influencers, legal action against for-profit engagement farms, right? Take them out. These are what these people are planning to silence your participation in the next election. How dare your cognitive framework deviate from their defined narrative? Here's how they're going to prepare. They're going to find and train influencers. What? They're going to remove old and unused accounts. They're going to fill information voids, stem the flow of advertising money. We got demonetized for 9 months after January 6th. 9 months. They just demonetized the whole channel. Sorry, you're done. Yeah. And that can take out somebody, man. So it was a big, big hit. It was a big hit. Fortunately, I had a law firm at the time. So stem flow of advertising money, right? It's critical. They're doing it again. You're seeing them demonetize traumatize people and nuke people. Honeypot social community. Oh gosh. So that they can just catalog everybody. Here, rate limit engagement. Redirect searches away from disinfo so they can just take your search away. Honeypot, a fake engagement system. Okay, so like be cognizant out there. Like when you're traveling around talking to people, bots to engage and distract the trolls. Like this is military grade tactics. Probably with AI, ChatGPT, LLMs all over the place. Strengthen verification methods, verified IDs, prohibit images in political channels, add metadata, add warning labels, infiltrate disinformation platforms, social media source removals, infiltrate in groups. Infiltrate. Are you guys watching here? You CTIL punks? I hope you're learning something. Hope you're taking notes out there. Name and shame disinformation influencers. Maybe charge them with crimes. Maybe arrest them. Ensure platforms are taking down accounts. Marginalize and discredit extremist groups. Ban incident actors from funding sites. Countering social engineering training. Wild. Okay, so this is what our military is doing. And then also in the execution, let's see what else. Pump priming, they say. Micro-target likely targets with counter messages. Train journalists. I'm sure they've got a bunch of them. Train journalists to counter influence moves. Tool transparency. Ask the media not to report the false info, which they'll oblige. Repurpose images with counter messages, so steal your content and then reuse it. Engage in payloads. Don't engage in payloads. Hashtag jacking. Social media amber alerts. Remove and rate limit bots. Cut off banking access. These people cut off your banking access so that you can't access your money. Wild. Influencer disavows misinfo. Expire likes and retweets. Mark content with ridicule and decelerates. Ridicule the other side. Humorous counter narratives. Okay, this is stuff that we do here. You know, we lampoon the other side. It's very effective and they make it easy, which is why they have to silence us. Like these are some of the things that we do to mock and hammer them. And so they need military operations to counter this, right? Satire, ridicule, lampooning. These are the tools that are thousands of years old, right? Been doing this since the dawn of time, ridiculing and lampooning the people in charge. But they want to use those same tactics because they want to silence you. Now, we're just a live stream, okay? This is the military, right? They've got go physical. Don't even know what that means. They don't have anything under there. They probably left that one off the chart for a reason. Go physical. Don't know what that means. And persistence. DMCA takedown requests. Spam domestic actors with lawsuits. Look at that, man. Spam domestic actors with lawsuits. It's an official tactic. Scary stuff. And seize and analyze botnet servers, right? And this is happening to certain people. Like, for example, you can say, hey, this is like a weaponized tactic. Like they're going after, like hunters using some of these tactics, right? Going after Garrett Ziegler and those guys at Marco Polo USA. Here, evaluation. They also want to poison monitoring and evaluation data, whatever that means. Poison the monitoring and evaluation data. And they want to bomb link shorteners with calls. Add random links to network graphs. These are people just wrecking the internet for their own, purpose, wrecking free speech. And it is a government-private partnership, all in the interest of securing their narratives. Yeah, it's really, really disgusting. So as we carry on, this is what else they've got for us. Here, they have attackers and defenders. We've got some tools here, artifacts, narratives, incidents, and campaigns. And I actually don't like this color coordination. I don't think it's a bad slide. But here, all of this, Brewer went on to describe how they got around the First Amendment. He says, he worked with TERP. He explained this was a way to get non-traditional media partners into one room. They reported sweeping government censorship during the first 6 months of 2019. They analyzed incidents, numerous reporting systems. In every incident mentioned, the victims of misinformation were on the political left. Wow. Included Obama, Podesta, Hillary, and Macron. Wait a minute. The report was open about the fact that its motivation for counter-information were the twin political earthquakes of 2016, Brexit and the election of Trump. They said the victims of misinformation were on the left, right? So we have to stop the misinformation to protect Obama, Podesta, Hillary, and Macron. Now, a study of the antecedents said that we have to stop the usual useful idiots. Now it's our brains that are being hacked, and we have to focus on information that, quote, changes beliefs and changes narratives. Now, the report laments that the government and corporate media, they no longer have full control of information. Here's what the report says. For a long time, the ability to reach mass audiences belonged to the nation state. In the USA, we had broadcast licensing through ABC, CBS, and NBC. The government controlled the message. Now, however, control of information and informational instruments has been allowed to devolve to large technology companies, and they've been blissfully complacent in facilitating access to public information by other means. Yeah, we have shows like this. The authors advocated for police, military, and intelligence involvement, including the Five Eyes nations and Interpol, to suggest that we need a new framework to stop this. We also need pre-bunking to preemptively inoculate a vulnerable population to the messaging. Now, the view of disinformation was overtly political. They said most misinformation is actually true, says Terp, but it's set in the wrong context. Now, she's an eloquent explainer of the strategy of using anti-disinformation, says you're not trying to get people to believe lies most of the time, you're just trying to make them change their belief sets. And so the in-group now, somebody else says this is a violation of our First Amendment, and this is, I mean, the report goes on, and you can see here, they were flagging these, right? No more lockdowns. You got flagged for misinformation. You have an alerting, you have an organization process, you have a collection process, and you have an action process, all working to silence all of us. Here's the timeline. They created and established the mission statement. They worked their papers. They created a techniques list. They refined the protocols. They had a black hat presentation. They had different population counters lists, blue team workshops, and so on. An entire censorship industrial complex focused on us, focused on our participation, sick things that are happening. So that is the CTIL files version 1. We heard from Michael Shellenberger. Matt Taibbi gives us his opening statement. He's also been participating in this inquiry. Here's what he sounds like.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Plaskett, and members of the committee for giving us the opportunity to speak today. Exactly 1 year ago today, I had my first look at the documents that came to be known as the Twitter files. We've learned a lot since then. When Michael and I testified before the good people of this committee in March, we both talked about how this isn't a partisan issue at all, despite the fact that it's been repeatedly described as a right-wing conspiracy theory or a right-wing fantasy. We found evidence of suppression of movements on both sides, including leftist movements like the Yellow Vests, parties like the Green Party, organizations like Consortium magazine. Just this week, Michael and I reported on the group that he talked about, the CTIL League. In those documents, we found evidence of monitoring groups like the Democratic Socialists of America, hashtags like Healthcare for All. The nature of censorship programs is that they tend to expand in all directions, and these programs already have. As someone who voted for Democrats his whole life and who got his ideas about speech issues from people like Senator Frank Church, Paul Wellstone, Dennis Kucinich.
Kucinich used to be a free speech hero for the left. He was ranting about government censorship.
I believe also that there's a less obvious but more important reason that people across the spectrum should care about this issue. And the former executive director of the ACLU, Ira Glasser, once explained to a group of students why he didn't support hate speech codes on campuses. The problem, he said, wasn't the speech. The problem was, quote, who gets to decide what's hateful? Who gets to decide what to ban? Because, quote, most of the time, it ain't you. The story that came out in the Twitter files, and for which more evidence surfaced in both the Missouri v. Biden lawsuit and this committee's Facebook files releases and the CTI League documents, they all speak directly to Ira Glasser's concerns. There's been a dramatic shift in attitudes about speech in this country, and many politicians now clearly believe the bulk of Americans can't be trusted to digest information on their own. This mindset imagines that if we see one clip from RT, we'll stop being patriots, that once exposed to hate speech, we'll become bigots ourselves automatically.
Right, we're too dumb.
That if we read even one Donald Trump tweet, we'll become insurrectionists.
America.
Having come to this conclusion, the government agencies like the DHS and the FBI and the quasi-private agencies who do anti-disinformation work have taken upon themselves the paternalistic responsibility to sort out for us what is and is not safe. While they see great danger in allowing others to read controversial material, it's taken for granted they themselves will be immune to the dangers of speech. This leads to the one inescapable question about these new anti-disinformation programs that is never discussed but needs to be. Who does this work? Stanford's Election Integrity Project helpfully made a graphic showing the quote-unquote external stakeholders involved in their content review operation. It showed 4 columns: government, civil society, platforms, and media. There's one group that's conspicuously absent from that list: people. Ordinary people. Whether America continues the informal sub-rosa censorship system we've seen in the Twitter files or the Facebook files, or whether it formally adopts something like Europe's draconian New Digital Services Act, it's already abundantly clear who won't be involved in this kind of work. There'll be no dock workers doing content flagging, no poor people from inner city neighborhoods, no single moms pulling multiple waitressing jobs, no immigrant store owners or Uber drivers. These programs will always feature a tiny tiny, rarefied sliver of affluent professional class Americans, censoring a huge and ever-expanding pool of everyone else. Take away the highfalutin talk about countering hate and reducing harm, and anti-disinformation is just a bluntly elitist gatekeeping exercise. If you prefer to think in progressive terms, it's class war. If one small demographic over here has broad control over the whole speech landscape, and a great big one over there has no control whatsoever, it follows that one of those groups will end up with more political power than the other.
That's the point.
Which one is the winner? Paraphrase Ira Glasser, it probably ain't yours. It isn't just one side or the other that will lose if these programs are allowed to continue. It's pretty much everyone, which is why these programs must be defunded before it's too late. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree, man. And this is for everybody. Like, free speech is a natural, God-given, humanitarian right. It's how we become and embrace our humanity. Our ability to think and reason, our consciousness is communicated through our speech. And they want to censor that. It's anti-human. It's not good for the left, even if they think it's good for them. You know, it's like a kid. It's like, you can't eat all the ice cream. Okay, you can't censor everybody. It's not good for you. You're going to wreck the whole planet, idiots. So here's Dan Goldman, one of them, who can't figure this out, who just turns around and turns this into a Hunter Biden conspiracy theory conversation. We're talking about government military grade censorship, and this whack job is talking about Hunter Biden. And he's a conspiracy theorist now with the rest of us.
You've talked about the Hunter Biden laptop and how the FBI knew it existed.
And suppressed it.
You are aware, of course, that the laptop, so to speak, that was published in the New York Post, was actually a hard drive that the New York Post admitted here was not authenticated as real. It was not the laptop the FBI had. You're aware of that, right?
It was the same contents.
How do you know?
Because it's the same. I mean, it's,
you would have to
CBS News
authenticate it to know it was the same
contents.
contents. You have no idea. You know hard drives can be manipulated.
Are you suggesting the New York Post participated in a conspiracy to construct the contents of the Hunter Biden laptop?
No, sir. The problem is that hard drives can be manipulated by Rudy Giuliani or Russia.
What's the evidence that happened?
Well, there is actual evidence of it, but the point is it's not the same.
There's no evidence for it, so you're engaging in a conspiracy.
I'm glad you agree with me, Mr. Shellenberger, that transparency is the most important thing. And my last question for you is, do you think it would be transparent if Hunter Biden came to this Congress and testified in a public hearing, and more transparent than if he testified privately?
I mean, literally, I've never thought about that. I have no idea.
I'm not here for this.
You don't know? I literally never thought about that.
Public testimony more transparent than private testimony?
Are you familiar with the First
Mr.
Amendment?
Chairman, I yield back.
The Congress shall take no action to abridge freedom of speech.
Yeah,
and that's what you just described.
Mr. Shell.
There you go. I mean, Dan, I don't know what he's talking about. He's like, what the heck? Where are we, man? Why are you talking about Hunter, you weird freak? All right, this is Jim Jordan now, who's going to close it out. And they're all trying to justify censorship. Like, I don't know why censorship is not a universal thing. Actually, I do know why. It's because they use it to win, because they can't compete in the regular arena of ideas. They have to censor their opponents because they're bullies, cheaters, and liars. And so this is what Shellenberger says when Jim Jordan is asking about this, because the response from the left was, well, they didn't censor everything. Like, there was only like a certain percentage, and like 13% censorship is not that bad.
Mr. Shellenberger, is 13% censorship still censorship?
Absolutely.
And the other 87% is what we call the chilling effect that the courts have long recognized that they engaged in. That is the problem.
There's a broad, by the way, part of the operation, Congressman Goldman, part of the operation was to change the terms of service. So you see them constantly trying to change the terms of service. You see them, it was 35% of the URLs that were, this is going to EIP, were labeled, removed, or soft blocked. That's all forms of censorship. That censorship is not just removal.
But 65% were not. So how can the government be so coercive?
So does the First Amendment say
that's
that the
about par
government
for the
can
course on government
Does the
efficiency?
First Amendment say the government can censor?
Time of the gentleman has
They're not
expired.
censoring. They're flagging in the social media companies.
Under coercion.
35% of a First Amendment? Or?
It's not the First Amendment. It's the terms of service, as you said, and they are flagging it for the social media companies to make their own decisions. That is not the First Amendment. That is the terms of service.
We have just seen
Congressman, you're an attorney. You know that 4 federal judges have already ruled that.
And I know that it's on appeal in front of the Supreme Court right now.
that debate was very constructive.
that was
I think that got to the heart of the issue.
It was constructive. I tell you, man, it makes me want to go testify in front of the House of Representatives. It sounds fun. What, Dan? You little punk? how about this, right? Whatever he questions you about, whatever, you know, just be prepared just to go after the Democrats, essentially. So shout out to Shellenberger, shout out to Taibbi for holding their grounds in there, for bringing us this incredible news. I mean, these guys are doing some really, really important reporting, some very heavy lifting. This stuff is nefarious, man. It is the mind control that we're all talking about, right? We all wake up, where do these weird narratives start? Like, why are we all listening to like underwater submarines blowing up? Like, where do these narratives come that just capture everybody's attention and just deviate us down different paths? It's right here. Yeah, they just exposed it all. And it's still in operation, I'm sure of it. And they're gearing up, man. And so we've got to overcome that organically. All of this digital suppression, debanking, the whole, you know, Jeopardy board of spreadsheet problems that they had up there for us to see, different attack vectors and so on. We got to overcome that in massive, massive numbers, and we will. And so we'll be here continuing to cover this, my friends. Thank you for joining us as we do. Thank you for hitting that subscribe button wherever it is you're watching it. Thanks for inviting a friend or family member to come over and join us. We go live 5 p.m. Eastern time, and we'd love to see you here with them. We'll look forward to seeing everybody here on the next one.